So you're sitting here waiting for answers when you would never get them, but you refuse to let go. You refuse to surrender the closure to God. You keep picking at this wound, but you're asking God to heal and restore you. You can't do both. Which one you want? Because acceptance starts when we recognize that some answers are simply beyond our reach. They are. And that's when the rubber meets the road. Either you're going to continue to dig in the sore, in the wound, continue to feel the pain, continue to feel the effects of it, or you're going to surrender the healing to God. But they both can't be happening at the same time. They can't. And here's the big question. Even if you got the answer that you think you needed, would you still be able to heal? Would it heal you? If the person called you today, if they answered every question, would it erase the pain of it all? And oftentimes that answer will be no. Why? Because the wound isn't always the missing information. The wound is what happened. Hey, it's your girl Dorcas, and welcome back to the Dorcas Pittman podcast, where I am on this journey of empowering her to drop the cape and heal for real. This is the space where courage, clarity, and strategy meets real healing. So last week I started this conversation about communication, how the lack of communication will often lead to certain relationships, certain situations ending. And in that lack of communication, we often feel mishandled or hurt. And we have to acknowledge that your lack of communication and how this relationship ended, it hurt me. And we have to acknowledge that one so that we can move on. And so I want to continue the conversation this week because when things end that way, when we are hurt, it leaves us with a lot of questions. It oftentimes leaves us with the why questions. Why did they leave? Why they didn't communicate with me? Why did they treat me that way? Why wasn't I enough for them to handle me differently? Like, why didn't they value me enough to communicate effectively? Why did they have to hurt? And the reality is, some of these questions will never get answered. They will never get answered, not because they're not important, not because they don't matter, but because healing was never meant to be dependent on another person's explanation. And many of us stay emotionally connected to old wounds because we're still waiting for clarity from people who may never provide it. So the question now becomes, are you willing to heal without getting the answers you thought you needed? And so that's where this conversation today is going to land. Are you willing to heal even if you never get the questions or get the answers to the questions that you think you need? And I know this conversation is needed because so many people are waiting for people to acknowledge them, acknowledge the pain, acknowledge the situation. And you're sitting there waiting and waiting, and it never happens. Been there, done that, got the shirt, that had the t-shirt to prove it. But as we as we have this conversation today, I just want you to think about something. Think about some things. And one of those things is that every why doesn't require an answer. Every why that you have, it doesn't require an answer. Because some answers would not change what happened. And that's a reality. And healing begins when we stop making people our source of closure. You won't close that chapter because you are waiting for someone to answer a question or to acknowledge something. And we have to stop making them the source. They're the source of your pain, but they're not the source of your closure. And peace is found in acceptance, not the explanation. God's peace is available when clarity is not. So I want you to ground yourself in those statements as we move through this conversation today. Because we have to break out of the cycle of having to have all the answers. Because the Bible tells us, trust in the Lord with all our heart and lean not on our own understanding. In all our ways, acknowledge or submit to God, and He will direct our paths. And some translations say, make our path straight. And so, us continuing to stay wound up in seeking the why and wanting to understand things, that goes against God's own word. Because acceptance often requires us to surrender our need to understand. Those the why questions that you have, that is your need to understand, and your healing is based upon your acceptance to surrender your need to understand. We have to get used to not having all the answers. That part. So the first thing I want to touch bases on is that if you continue to be on this search for answers, that search can literally become a prison. Because what you're gonna do is you're gonna continue to replay the conversations. You're gonna continue to overanalyze the behavior, revisit the situations, trying to uncover the missing piece of the puzzle. Like, why am I not getting this? What am I missing? You're constantly revisiting the pain, the trauma, all of those things. Not revisiting to heal, but revisiting, trying to understand why it happened in the first place. And that cycle is becoming a prison that you're constantly stuck in. And honestly, the reason why you're not healing, even though you're asking God, God heal me, God restore me, it's because you're still investigating why it happened in the first place. God just gave me this visual of a doctor trying to heal a deep wound. But what you're doing, every day you're going in and you're digging, you're picking at it, you're digging in and you're picking at it. But you're saying, doctor, I need you to heal this wound. But you're telling the doctor that you need him to heal you, but then you're doing the opposite. Is you're picking at it every day. You're asking God to restore you, to heal you, but every day you're constantly going down this rabbit hole trying to investigate and and understand why it happened in the first place. How do you expect to heal, sis? How? And that very search for answers has become the very cage keeping you locked in the past. Yeah, I said it. That search, that constant search is keeping you locked in the past. And my question is, what answers are you hoping to find? What answers are you hoping to find? Because you're keeping this wound open. Even though you're asking God to heal it, you're still digging and investigating and trying to figure out why it's not healing or why it happened in the first place. So what answers are you trying to find by continuing to dig and investigate? What answers? Can you even answer that question? Do you even know what answers you're trying to find? Do you? Because here's a reality that I want you to understand, that not every question will have an accessible answer. Sometimes people just don't know why they did it. And you might be like, oh, that's not acceptable. You mean to tell me you did this? You mean to tell me you mishandled our business? You mean to tell me you mishandled me and you don't know why? Honestly, some people just don't know why they do things. They just do it. They just make horrible decisions. They just choose not to communicate. And they don't have an answer. Sometimes they just won't tell the truth. Why? Because of shame. They're not going to tell you the truth. Whether it's shame, whether it's pride, whether it's fear. you're not going to get the truth. And sometimes they're just not willing to have the conversation. Sometimes you all you're getting is, oh, you still dwelling on that? You might as well get over that. Oh, girl, I moved on. You see how many business I got now? I'm not finna sit and have a conversation about something we started 10 years ago. They're not willing to have the conversation. And the thing about it is, you can't make anybody do anything that they don't want to do. You can't force them to have a conversation with you. You can, but it may be illegal. But we're not trying to go that route. And here's a big one. So many people are waiting for why and the answers to the why from the people who are no longer here. They're not even on this side of heaven anymore. And you're still stuck in this cage of trying to find answers, and they're not even here to give them to you. It reminds me of this client I had, and the person that caused her the most pain was no longer here. He they passed away, and it was like how it was this anger of, how dare you leave and not address this? How dare you leave this earth and leave me with this pain, these unanswered questions? How dare you? How dare you leave and me not be able to tell you what I need to tell you so that I can feel better? You want to know what we did? She said it anyway. Because what we're not going to do is allow you to stay in this cycle of prison, because you're not able to say what you need to say or get the answers you need because they're no longer here. So say what you need to say. Get it out. Acknowledge it. Because you've been holding it in, and it's creating pressure in them pipes. So guess what, girl? Release the pressure. And can I tell you, when she said what she had to say, the weight lifted and she was able to walk in healing. So you're sitting here waiting for answers when you would never get them. But you refuse to let go. You refuse to surrender the closure to God. You keep picking at this wound, but you're asking God to heal and restore you. You can't do both. Which one you want? Because acceptance starts when we recognize that some answers are simply beyond our reach. They are. And that's when the rubber meets the road. Either you're going to continue to dig in the sore, in the wound, continue to feel the pain, continue to feel the effects of it, or you're going to surrender the healing to God. But they both can't be happening at the same time. They can't. And here's the big question. Even if you got the answer that you think you needed, would you still be able to heal? Would it heal you? If the person called you today, if they answered every question, would it erase the pain of it all? And oftentimes that answer will be no. Why? Because the wound isn't always the missing information. The wound is what happened. The wound was created because my mom left me when I was 2 years old. That was the wound, not the why. The wound was I was molested, not the why. The wound was you mishandle me because your lack of communication, and our relationship had to end, and I was left feeling some type of way. That hurt me, not the why. We have to stop making the person who broke us responsible for fixing us. It is our responsibility to heal, not them. I couldn't wait on anybody who caused trauma in my life, in my childhood. I could not wait for them to heal me. I had to choose that for myself. I had to say, If I never get a conversation, if I never get an explanation, if I never get an answer to the why, if they never acknowledge my pain, I'm still going to choose to heal. And that is the space that you have to stay in. A space of, I am going to surrender every circumstance, every situation, every wound that affects me, that caused me pain, to God, because He is my healer. And faith without works is dead. So my faith is God is going to heal me. My work is surrendering to His way and His will. And here's the big thing I want you to get. Acceptance is not agreement. Accepting what happened does not mean you approve of it. It doesn't mean what they did was right. It doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It just means that it happened. You didn't like it. You wouldn't have chosen it for yourself or anybody else. But it will not. But it will not stop me from healing. It will not. I will finally stop resisting the reality of the fact that it happened, so that I can accept that it did, which will create a space for my healing. Accepting doesn't mean I approve of the behavior. It just means I'm going to move on. It means I'm going to acknowledge that it did what it did. But I would not turn it into an altar. I will not allow myself to be in a prison of my thoughts trying to figure out why. That's what it means. And that's what I want you to get. Acceptance is acknowledging reality without continuing to fight it. The reality was I was abandoned. And I know why. It was because she wanted better. And I don't blame her. The reality was I was exposed to sexual activities at a young age. I was molested. The reality was I was raped in college. The reality was I was addicted to pornography. The reality was business relationships ended because people mishandled me due to lack of communication, and it hurt. That's the reality. And I accept that was the reality, and I accept that it hurt me, and I accept that it created a wound. And because I accept it, and because I acknowledge it, now I have space to heal. I have space to heal. Do you have space to heal? Have you created a space that's conducive to healing? Have you? What would your life, what would your leadership, your business, what would your peace look like tomorrow if you stop waiting for answers today? What would it look like? What would it look like? Because if today you're digging into a wound by continuing to investigate the why, and you still feel the pain, you still feel the heaviness, you still feel broken, you still feel abandoned, you still feel mishandled, you still feel mistreated. If you investigating today left you still feeling all of those things, if you stop the investigating today and surrender your healing to God, surrender the unanswered questions to God, then your tomorrow would be the opposite. Because now you will have the peace of leaning on God. Now you will have the peace that comes from acknowledging God and allowing Him to direct your path. The peace of knowing that you surrender every unanswered question to God. So I need you to release your need to understand everything and trust God with the answers that you may never receive. Choose peace over endless searching. And I want you to stop postponing your healing while waiting for someone else's explanation. That's what I want for you. I want you to release your need to understand everything. Trust God with answers you may not receive. Choose peace over an endless search. And I want you to stop postponing your healing while waiting for someone else's explanation. Because that explanation doesn't deserve that much power over you. That explanation doesn't get to keep you in a cage, in a prison of unanswered questions. That explanation shouldn't define who you are. And that explanation should not keep you from becoming everything that God created you to be. So sis, yes, you spent years waiting for a conversation that may never happen. You've postponed your healing while hoping someone else would provide the missing piece to the puzzle. But your peace is not hidden in their explanation. Your healing is not waiting on their apology, and your future is not dependent upon their understanding. I want you today, this week, this month, to release the need to know everything and trust God with what you don't understand. Accept what is, release what was, and make room for the beautiful things God has in store for you. Why? Because you are her, sis. You are healed, you are empowered, and you are restored. Until next week, talk to you soon. Peace.